A very good morning. You're watching Today in Parliament with me, Aishwarya Kapoor, and here are the Parliament headlines. Rajya Sabha to take up bill to amend the Epidemic Diseases Act, bill to sanction stricter action against those who cause harm to health workers, penalties to include jail terms ranging from 6 months to 7 years and fine of up to 5 lakh rupees for offenders. Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code Second Amendment Bill 2020 to come up in the upper house. Bill suspends insolvency proceedings for payment defaults by companies for 6 months, extendable up to 1 year from 25th of March 2020. Banking Regulation Amendment Bill 2020 also included in the day's business. And in the legislative business in the lower house, Lok Sabha to take up bill relating to changes in some acts affecting taxation laws. Also listed are 3 bills related to labour reform, including the Industrial Relations Code 2020 and the Social Security Code 2020. Three bills are listed for consideration and passing in the upper house today. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will move the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code Second Amendment Bill 2020 for consideration and passing. The bill amends the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. It suspends insolvency proceedings for companies arising out any payment defaults for a period of 6 months, not extending beyond 1 year from 25th of March 2020. The Finance Minister will also move the Banking Regulation Amendment Bill 2020 for consideration and passing. This bill amends the Banking Regulation Act 1949. It has already been passed by the Lok Sabha. And Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan will move with the Epidemic Diseases Amendment Bill 2020. This bill amends the Epidemic Diseases Act 1897. It prescribes, among other things, stringent punishment to offenders who attack or harm health workers, combating epidemics. Kriti Mishra, our colleague, is now joining us live from Parliament. A very good morning, Kriti. Kriti, talking first about the upper house, 3 bills are in the agenda of the upper house. Most important, of course, being the Banking Regulation Amendment Bill, that brings the cooperative banks under the supervision of the RBI. Of course, this bill coming in wake of, deteriorating condition of cooperative banks in the country. And also, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will move the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code Second Amendment Bill 2020 for consideration and passing. So tell us more about these 2 bills first.
Well, Aishwarya, talking about the upper house today and the 2 bills that would be moved for consideration and passage by Nirmala Sitharaman, Finance Minister, are of course the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Second Amendment Bill and also the Banking Regulation Bill. The Banking Regulation Bill has already been passed by the Lok Sabha. Remember, this bill puts the cooperative banks under the supervision of the RBI. It will also allow RBI to unveil a scheme for amalgamation or restructuring of these banks without putting them under the moratorium. This bill is a very important bill for upholding the interests of the small investors and to avoid situation that we saw in the PMC bank. So this is a very important bill that will be taken up in the Rajya Sabha today. And the other bill, of course, is the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Second Amendment Bill. Remember, the code that the government has furnished in the public domain that provides for time-bound insolvency proceedings of the corporates or the individuals. Now, this particular amendment bill provides for temporarily suspension of the insolvency proceedings because remember, the government had taken several steps in order to ensure bailout of the companies reeling under the stress by COVID-19. So this bill is a very important bill for temporarily suspending the insolvency proceedings for the corporate. So certainly these 2 important bills would be taken up in the Rajya Sabha today. Aishwarya?
Kriti, and another very important bill that is going to come up in the upper house is the Epidemic Diseases Amendment Bill. This is a very important because it recognizes any crime against the health workers in our country as a cognizable and non-bailable offence. So a very important bill, especially at this time when the country is fighting the COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, absolutely, Aishwarya. Remember, these doctors or the healthcare workers are called the COVID frontline warriors that are fighting for the country. Now, this bill protects the healthcare workers. Now, the assault could be any harm to the property or impinging their right of working or discharging their duties. Or this bill also provides for the expansion of the powers of the central government in order to control epidemics. So, this is a very important bill that will be taken up in the Rajya Sabha today. Aishwarya?
Kriti, stay with us. We'll just come back to you. We also need to discuss about the legislative business in the Lok Sabha. So let's take a look first at the legislative business in the lower house. Labour Minister Santosh Kumar Gangwar will move a proposal in the House to withdraw several bills. Now, these include the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2019, the Industrial Relations Code 2019, the Code on Social Security 2019. And Labour Minister Santosh Kumar Gangwar will also introduce the following bills in the Lok Sabha: Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2020, the Industrial Relations Code 2020, and the Code on Social Security 2020. And Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will move the following bills for consideration and passing: the Taxation and Other Laws Relaxation and Amendment of Certain Provisions Bill 2020 to be taken up for consideration and passing, the Companies Amendment Bill 2020 to be taken up for consideration and passing, the Bilateral Netting of Qualified Financial Contracts Bill 2020 to be taken up for consideration and passing, the Factoring Regulation Amendment Bill 2020 to be taken up for consideration and passing. The Home Minister Amit Shah will also move bills. Let's take a look at the bills which will be moved for consideration and passing. The National Forensic Sciences University Bill 2020 to be taken up for consideration and passing, the Rashtriya Raksha University Bill 2020 to be taken into consideration and passing. Let's go back to Kriti Mishra. Kriti, yesterday we saw Lok Sabha proceedings were adjourned 4 times, due to the opposition protest. And, looking at the heavy legislative agenda in the lower house today, how do you look at the day likely to pan out in the lower house?
Well, Aishwarya, as you've mentioned, the Lok Sabha also has a heavy legislative agenda. Yesterday also, we saw that the Lok Sabha took up supplementary demands for grants. There were extensive discussions on that particular grants. So talking about today's agenda, of course, you've mentioned about the codes and also three important bills that will be moved by Finance Minister or Corporate Affairs Minister Nirmala Sitharaman that pertains to the Companies Amendment Bill, which further provides ease of doing business in the country. There's another bill that seeks to strengthen the financial market in the country, and also very important bill that seeks to replace the ordinance, which is the Taxation and Other Laws Relaxation from Certain Provisions, which provides for extension of filing of income tax returns or provides for extension for linking Aadhaar with PAN, and also provides for extension under the Vivad Se Vishwas scheme for disclosures. So these are the important bills that will be taken up in the Lok Sabha today. Aishwarya?
Kriti, thank you so much for all those updates from Parliament. And in some other legislative business in the upper house, a following minister will table papers related to their ministries. Prakash Javadekar for the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change, and the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. Prahlad Joshi for the Ministry of Mines and the Ministry of Coal. Kiran Rijiju for the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports. Mansukh Mandavia for the Ministry of Shipping. And Ratan Lal Kataria for the Ministry of Jal Shakti. Also, MPs Bhupendra Yadav and Rajiv Chandrasekhar will table reports of the Committee on Public Accounts. And following ministers will make statements in the House. Prakash Javadekar will make a statement regarding the status of implementation of recommendations in the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Information Technology on demands for grants for the year 2019-2020. And Ratan Lal Kataria will make a statement on the status of implementation of recommendations contained in the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Water Resources on demands for grants for the year 2019-2020 and 2020-2021. Kiran Rijiju will also make a statement regarding the status of implementation of recommendations contained in the department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee on Social Justice and Empowerment on demands for grants 2019-2020. The House will also pay condolence to the passing away of former member Nazneen Farooq. And several ministers will also lay papers on the table in the Lok Sabha. Let's take a look at them. Santosh Kumar Gangwar for the Ministry of Labour and Employment. Prahlad Singh Patel for the Ministry of Culture. Dhotri Sanjay Shamrao for the Ministry of Education. Anurag Singh Thakur for the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Union Minister Prahlad Singh Patel is listed to make a statement regarding the status of implementation of the recommendations contained in the 275th report of the Standing Committee on Transport, Tourism and Culture on demands for grants 2020-21 pertaining to the Ministry of Tourism. And with that, we wrap up this edition of Today in Parliament. Thanks for watching. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV. Up ahead is Sansad Mein Aaj.